Hello, everyone, and welcome to our special council meeting for this Monday, June 29th. Time is now 5:15. We call the meeting to order. We start this meeting as we do all our meetings by just acknowledging that we're gathering on the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish people, specifically the Lekwungen-speaking people known today as the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations. And their connections to this land continues to this day. And also just point out, not that anybody's in the room, but for anybody who would be, including staff and council, that we are live streaming this broadcast, and it'll be available both live and on archives on the website. We have an agenda in front of us. Excuse me, it's been amended this today just to include one additional item, but no further amendments attached. With that, I'm just going to start the mayor's remarks portion of this. And I'll do that by officially welcoming everyone here to a first in-person meeting that we've had since we started this COVID madness that we've all been through. So it's very nice to look around the room and see all of you here. Unfortunately, Councillors Braithwaite and Zelka are not able to join us in person tonight. But would like to they are on audio conference with us, and they will be fully participating in this meeting. So I just appreciate their ability to join us, even though they weren't able to make it here today. I also just want to acknowledge that tonight might be bumpy. It's a new format, a new structure, a little awkward in terms of. So we're trying to make this as open as possible. We have a public participation period. We have a few other things that are happening here today, trying to bring it back to a sense of normal. We don't yet, as of this meeting, have the reports that council normally does, or a new business section, but we will be getting back to that as well, I believe, at the next meeting. So as we make this gradual transition to normal, as our Parks and Rec, for instance, get back into providing some services, I just want to express my appreciation to all the residents of Oak Bay, and who have been very patient as we go through this process, and understanding that we're doing all of these changes with the interest of keeping everybody safe. That's both staff and the public during these changes. So just also want to take a moment to recognize that this is a bit longer than usual, mayor's remarks, but just the impact of noise. I think many people being at home so much more than usual have been really impacted by some of the noise that's happened in our community, and both if from construction or from other purposes. And I just, we have actually in our schedule to review the noise bylaw as part of our bylaw review coming forward in the next year or so, but appreciate that. We're very aware of the fact that some of these, the impact that that's had lately, and that we're looking at options, over time to try and mitigate that. Many of them, of course, being mitigated by people going back to work, but I thought it was just appropriate just to recognize that we do hear you. We certainly heard from a number of residents about the problems that have occurred, and we'll do what we can to help in the future. Second to last, just want to talk a little bit about the passing of Larry McCann. Dr. McCann he just meant a lot to Oak Bay, both the building regional history and community building. He actually wrote the definitive history of the Uplands and was very instrumental in helping Uplands become a National Historical Site. He was a very generous supporter of the archives and of heritage, both in Oak Bay and around the region. He was a very beloved speaker at the local history talks, a very well-liked teacher at the university, and a very well-respected academic with over 70 scholarly works under his belt. So he's also just a genuinely nice person who gave of himself very, very much to this community over many years. And I just want to take a moment he passed away this week, and I just wanted to say condolences to the family, but also just express our appreciation for all that he's given to our community. And last but certainly not least, I want to this is public knowledge, but I just want to express how happy I am to announce that our current deputy chief constable, Ray Bernodes, is stepping into the chief constable role, so he'll be the new Oak Bay Police Chief. And just last week, we were able to announce that a new deputy chief constable, Mark Fisher, who's a familiar name from the past for many of us. He was a former police chief, has gone on to do incredible things with the RCMP, and is now back here to help grow and mentor our Oak Bay Police Department. And it's a fairly incredible 1-2 punch in terms of the leadership that we have in Oak Bay and our police force. So Very appreciative of Mark coming to join us and very excited about what that'll bring to our community going forward. We are now moving to the public participation period, and this is our first attempt at this, so we'll do our very best. First of all, I'll just ask staff, is there anybody who pre-registered and is here in person?
Your Worship, there were no pre-registered attendees.
Okay, and is there anybody who's arrived late that's wants to come in? I'm not seeing any. Okay, so with that, we do have the ability to take dial-in. So because the live stream is a little bit delayed, it can take up to 20 seconds sometimes before people's notification. I just invite you, if you're watching at home and you want to call into the number at this time. We do have a bit of a queuing situation here, so our municipality is not set up for as a call center, so we'll take I think up to 3 calls, and then we'll have to put you on. If it's busy, just wait a minute or so and call back. We are following our procedures bylaw here. We have 20 minutes in total and up to 3 minutes. So I'm not 100% sure how I get notified if there is a person on the call. Ms. Hopkins, is there anybody on the call?
Your Worship, we'll just wait a moment to make sure that people have had an opportunity to dial in, and I will advise very shortly.
Okay, no problem. And I'm just gonna reiterate again that if you want to just approach us on this, you can call into the number. Ms. Hopkins, just read the number aloud for people.
The number to call is 250-598-3311.
Okay, again, that's 250-598-3311. That's the main number of the municipal hall. You'll get a person and they will help you get through at that point. I do want to point out that we do, of course, always are available for communications from the public. If you ever want to email obcouncil@oakbay.ca, those emails all get circulated to us as well. And we've had many of those emails over the past couple of months to inform us of issues and items that are of interest to the community. That will never stop, but this is just a chance for us to speak directly with people if they so wish. Ms. Hopkins, I'll just turn back to you again and see if there's anybody else that's called in. I'm actually just going to wait about another minute here, and I'm happy just to prattle on for a minute, just so if there's any calls, we can take them. If not, we'll move on to other business as part of council.
Your Worship, we haven't received any calls to this point.
Okay, I'll leave another 30 seconds just to account for any possible delays. Maybe I'll take this moment to thank staff for thanks staff for actually setting up the call in. This was something that we really wanted to do and make available. However, our system is not actually designed for this. So a lot of creativity had to go in from the IT department and our tech support services and our staff to kind of come up with some way that we could allow people to call in and provide that option for people to speak to us directly. I'm not seeing any more calls in here, so we'll just move on, I believe. But again, if anybody ever wishes to reach out to us, we're available all the time at obcouncil@oakbay.ca. Thank you very much. Item number 3 on our agenda is the Ministerial Order M192. I think fairly straightforward here, but Ms. Varela, did you wish to speak to this item? Or Ms. Hopkins, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just a brief overview. The purpose of the report is to present Council with the information and recommendations in connection with Ministerial Order M192 of the Public Safety and Solicitor General that was passed on June 17th, 2020. The new order requires that local governments consider and, where practical, implement a return of in-person public attendance at meetings of Council, or where that is not practical, pass a resolution outlining the ways in which the municipality is complying with the requirements for open meetings. In addition, the expedited bylaw adoption process is significantly reduced to only specific bylaws that can be adopted at the same meeting as they received third reading. So with the introduction of the limited in-person attendance, public participation by telephone, and existing webcasting services, the district is compliant with open meeting protocols. Public participation had been temporarily suspended to develop alternate means for public input, of which you're seeing us try a new approach this evening. While the new order allows in-person attendance at council meetings where possible, as you can see, the size and layout of the Oak Bay Council chambers poses significant challenges to effectively manage attendees, along with staff and council, while also maintaining the required physical distance. The maximum number of attendees has been capped to 4 to meet those requirements. So if a municipality is not able to allow in-person attendance, the order requires the local government to pass a resolution that states the basis for holding the meeting without public attendance, the means by which council is ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability, and that the meeting is not considered closed to the public. So given the alternate options available for the public to participate in the council meetings, staff are recommending that council pass a resolution that continues meetings with limited in-person participation where feasible until such time as there is the opportunity for much greater public attendance in the municipal hall through public health directives.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Hopkins. I'm happy to take questions or someone wishes to move the recommendation.
Move
We
the
can,
recommendation.
and then we can have discussion and questions after that.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Patterson, you had your hand up first in that case, so I'll let you go to you for any questions.
Thank you. Perhaps, I don't know a lot about the technology systems we do or don't have in the hall, so I do have a couple of questions. The one thing that I do note is the directions for people to dial in, and then if there is a busy signal that they hang up and they dial in again. Is there any alternative solution, or are we researching an alternative solution? Somehow that seems a bit cumbersome to me.
Ms. Hopkins?
Thank you. We are looking at some different options. This was a very quick implementation of readily available infrastructure so that we could be ready for this meeting and provide some opportunities to the public. We do have a couple of other things that we'll be researching, and if we have the opportunity to make that more accessible to the public and provide maybe a bit more of a smoother experience for them, we'll certainly do that.
And if I could just continue, if technology fails, do we have or are we working up on a backup plan for how we will handle public input at meetings?
Thank you, Ms. Councillor Patterson. How to practice here, Ms. Varela?
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff anticipates that the phone is a pretty reliable technology as we're using it tonight, and the live stream risk of losing it is minimal. It's the same as it would be in a regular council meeting prior to COVID. So as we move forward with alternative technologies, we will be thinking about potential failures if we move to another platform that has a greater risk.
And if I could
Keep going, yes.
just continue, because like most members of council, probably, who have been on Zoom meetings and Teams meetings, and we're all going through these new experiences. This sometimes comes up at other meetings, and I don't know if it applies to under this situation to us, or if it's a ministerial order that it blankets it all. But I understand that Robert's Rules of Order have also considered some of what is going on now, and so for some groups, they state that in order for the meeting to be valid, that the information on how meetings will be conducted, i.e. email, online chat room, phone or video conference, or whatever means you use, that there should be some sort of either temporary or permanent amendment to permit a variety of uses. So if perhaps you could just give an update on any information that you've received about this for local government.
Ms. Hopkins? Or Ms. Varela?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the district remains in compliance with best practices. Certainly as this evening's meeting was developed, we looked at that opportunity for openness, transparency, good governance. This is the best solution that we could give you tonight. Again, we feel we're in compliance with all of the expectations, and the resolution that's before you really buttons down that process by council endorsement. And they certainly are unusual times, so thank you for those questions.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Green?
And thank you for all the information in the report. And through you, Mayor, to Ms. Hopkins, just a couple of questions for clarification for the public, for those listening and watching. Just something that I was concerned about, that how will we restore incentives to bring back the public once we're able to bring back the public? So that's not for a question for tonight, but just something I've been thinking about. How do we get people interested in coming back? And for the public not online, how are they kept informed? So are we looking at Oak Bay News as a possible outlet, putting posters in key locations, that kind of thing? Because I do worry that there is a certain percentage of people that do not have a computer or access to websites and so on. Have we considered that over time and how we might want to address that? Thank you.
Ms. Hopkins?
Thank you for the question. So we haven't changed our regular process at the current time. We are treating council meeting other than all of the additional enhancements we've done for COVID, so which is not a small undertaking. But it's something that we could certainly look at the feasibility of doing, and maybe that'll form part of that piece of attracting people back when they're comfortable and understanding the safety precautions that have been put in place in the municipal hall for people to actually be able to come back.
Councillor Green, are you done? Okay. Councillor Appleton, and I will, after Councillor Appleton speaks, I'll just go to Councillor Zelka and Braithwaite to see if they have anything to add as well. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to staff. My understanding is the ministerial order also applies to things like public hearings, and so there's been sort of revisions to accommodating more people at public hearings. And this is more a curiosity question more than anything, but I'm just wondering what, and it's relatively early days, but what are you sharing some information with your colleagues in other municipalities about the challenges of pulling off a public hearing in this type of format, and what kind of best practices are getting discussed for that at this stage of the game? I don't think we have any impending public hearings, but we could very well be in this same format when a public hearing manifests itself. So I'm just wondering what is being suggested or what's being discussed in that vein.
Ms. Hopkins?
Thank you. Yes, the corporate officers in the region have a very tight and close network, so a lot of information is being shared, and we've had the fortune of our neighbors going through some of these processes and then sharing the successes and the challenges with us afterwards. So we will be in good form for a public hearing should we have to call one. And the same things are in place, the same public health orders of no gatherings larger than 50 and being able to maintain those physical distancing requirements. And so this order actually does not apply to public hearings. The previous order for public hearings that can be held electronically is still in effect. And so we have a number of different approaches that we can take should we need to have a public hearing.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton, anything else? Councillor Braithwaite or Zelka, do you have any questions or comments? We have a motion on the table.
No, thank you. May I ask a question? It's Eric.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, congratulations to staff on aligning our procedures as best as possible with Ministerial Order M192, sub-order, order number 3, with respect to these recent changes. I do note that that in the order, it talks about how this declaration or these changes in procedures are made pursuant to the Emergency Program Act and are in effect as long as there's a state of emergency in effect or any extension to the duration of that state of emergency. I believe that some amendments were made to the Emergency Program Act to allow certain provisions to be continued beyond state of emergency. And I just wanted to ask staff that, first of all, that I presume they're aware of those amendments, and that the ending of the state of emergency, might cause some confusion for some people. So we may have to clarify for certain treatment council and certainly members of the public as to specifically when this particular declaration comes into end, which may be independent of the ending of the state of emergency.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I'll pass that question over to Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. It seems like more of an observation. So I think the best answer would be that staff remain vigilant as the landscape changes. And I think this team has a lot to be proud of in its agile response to these changing conditions. Certainly some of our adjacent local governments haven't found the ability to invite the public back in. So right now we've got it figured out that until the pandemic is over or there's a vaccine, we've accommodated as many people as we can in here by very thorough scenario and layout planning and things like that. So lots of work has gone on to this, so congratulations to the team.
And for those not here,
And if I may?
yeah, I'm just going to, just for those that aren't in the room, the scenario and planning, et cetera, involves a lot of tape on the floor. Just in case you're wondering. Go ahead, Councillor Zalka.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the relationship between this order and what's happening later on in the agenda for item number 10. I presume that they're related to each other, since we do talk about electronic meetings and those sorts of things later on in item 10.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, there is a connection, and we had given 3 readings to early on in this pandemic to alter or amend our procedure bylaw, and then with the introduction of the orders, had not needed to proceed to adopt that. And now with the changes in those orders coming, we now have a need to adopt what was sitting at 3 readings, if council so chooses.
Excellent. Thank you. I'll save any further questions for that item on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zalka. Councillor Braithwaite did not have anything. Councillor Ney, I don't think had anything. No. Okay, so we have a motion live on the table. Any other discussion here before we call the question? I don't see any. So all those in... actually, can I just ask a quick question? I forgot I had some. There's just wording in here that says if people are coming in, they have to just answer questions, essentially create a declaration of their, they haven't been traveling, etc. But it also says they're required to sign a declaration prior to entering. Can you just explain what that means? Is Ms. Varela?
Thank you, Your Worship. So we do have a staff host in attendance in the lobby, and people who pre-register for attending to the meeting in public will be given a pre-screening, and then when they get here, the staff host will walk them through that questionnaire again. I think it'll be the staff host that actually signs for them, but again, as we're finding ways to invite the public back into Municipal Hall, it's a balance of creating elected officials, staff, and the public safe. So we're finding that this is a practice that other screening opportunities are using. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Okay, thank you very much. And my only other observation of this, it doesn't refer anywhere to asking or encouraging attendees to wear a mask where possible. And I think that can just be a practice we put into place. It doesn't have to be a change of this motion. But I think we should always be doing that if we have a chance, because we have masks here in case we need them. Councillor Green?
Yes, just quickly through you, Mayor, on the signing in, I think it makes a lot of sense for contact tracing. So if we have information about the individual, that seems to be a really safe practice, so thank you for that.
Thank you. I don't see any other comments, so I will then call the question, which is the motion to essentially approve the recommendation as laid out here. All those in favor? Any opposed? And I'll just go to the people on phone. I'll go Braithwaite, then Zalka. Councillor Braithwaite, what's your vote?
In favor.
Thank you. And Councillor Zalka?
In favor.
Thank you very much. That passes unanimously. We're moving on to item number 4 in the agenda. This is a statement of financial information, or SOFI. And now, do we have Director Payne on the phone with us to provide a quick overview? All right, then. Welcome, Director Payne.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just, before I begin, want to make sure that my volume is good enough. How do I sound?
You sound good to us, so we can adjust it subtly, I think, in the background. So go ahead.
Great. I will take it away. Thank you, Your Worship. Staff have prepared the Statement of Financial Information year ending December 31st, 2019. This financial report is in compliance with the Financial Information Act. It includes the already approved consolidated financial statements as well as some additional disclosures required under the Financial Information Act. The most prominent disclosures, of course, are the scheduled remuneration for both mayor and council and staff with remuneration exceeding $75,000, and the schedule of suppliers of goods and services. The typical statutory requirement is for council and the CFO to approve the statements by June 30th in the following year. However, the ministry has approved an extension to August 31st if need be. But we're sort of hoping to take some vacation in August, so we've brought it forward according to the regular statutory deadline. So I will, with that, I'll turn it over to council if there's any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the appropriate motion here is that council approve this, but we don't have to get to a motion yet. If there's questions, we can take questions. Councillor Patterson?
I'm fine to make a motion that council approve the statement of financial information for the year ended December 31st, 2019, but I will have a comment to make.
Absolutely.
I'll second.
So moved and seconded. Councillor Patterson, you have the floor.
And through you, Mayor, I will bring forward again a request that I have made in the past, and just for consideration for future reports, and that is that the schedule of employee remuneration and expenses hopefully in future reports can be changed to include the job titles. That is something that most members of the CRD, in fact, do in their reports. And I think it's a good practice because it emphasizes that remuneration is aligned with job description and responsibility, as is accountability. And so it links it more directly to the job description and not to the person's name that is on the list. So again, I am putting forward the request for consideration in future years.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Are there any other questions or comments at this time? Councillor Braithwaite, any questions or comments?
No, I'm fine. Thank you so much.
And Councillor Zelka?
Participant exiting.
Hazel.
Uh-oh. She, I think, hung up instead of hitting the mute. That's okay. She'll be back. Councillor Zelka?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just have a couple quick questions to Director Payne. One was just on page 1920, which is section 5. There's under the long-term debt, it shows 4 years, not 5 years of debt. And I'm just curious, maybe can you just give a quick explanation of why?
Yes, Your Worship. Can you hear me all right?
We can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you for the question. The notes in the financial statements do require disclosure of 5 years expected debt payments. However, our debt is due to expire in 2023, which is why there's
Announcing participant.
Hazel.
Welcome back, Councillor Braithwaite. No worries. Go ahead, Director Payne.
So I did finish answering the question, unless it was cut off, Your Worship.
No, you're fine. Thank you very much. And the second question was on item number 10. It just talks there about the contractual rights for leases. And I'm just curious, are those the predictions for future lease income, or is that the base minimum essentially that we can come to expect? And there may be lease payments on top of that. I know some of our leases have some performance metrics that contribute to the lease total.
Yes, and thank you, Your Worship. To answer your question, it would not include commission or contingent lease revenue. That it would only include lease revenue that is expected at a minimum.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, are there any other questions at this point? Comments? Not seeing any, then I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Braithwaite?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
All right, thank you very much. We have a unanimous vote in favor. Thank you very much for all the work putting that together. Mr. Payne, we have up number 5 on the agenda, the municipal consent for CRD bylaw 4304. Is this Mr. Haran, our Director of Engineering? Will speak to this. Welcome, Mr. Haran.
Thank you, Your Worship. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I'll just flash ahead. The CRD is in the process with the court.
Sorry, Mr. Haran. Mr. Frank, can I just ask you to speak up a little bit? You're a little muffled.
Thank you for that. Can you hear me better now?
A little bit.
Oh, okay. So I'm trying my best here. Hopefully that's better. I'll talk as loud as I can, and hopefully you can come through okay. The Capital Regional District is updating their liquid waste management core area establishment bylaw, which is the one that sets up the sewer service as a regional service. It currently has legacy arrangements for cost apportionment of the operating and capital costs of the regional sewer system. So with bringing the wastewater treatment plant online later this year, the idea is to modernize how the regional system is thought of, in other words, a system as a whole, so that the four existing trunk sewer systems and the wastewater treatment plant can be treated as a single system. So 5 of the 7 municipalities of the core area are asked to consent to these changes. 4 have already consented, and the remaining 3, OPE included, are considering it this week. We expect no significant financial impacts to OPE from the OPE perspective, and we do consider this change to be an increase in the efficiencies and a way to adopt best practices as an approach for the CRD. So our recommendation is that OPE Council's consents to this change.
Okay, thank you very much. I will just turn it over to Council. Again, we can have a motion or we can just have questions. Councillor Green.
I'll move the motion, and then people can, ask questions.
Moved and seconded. So, Councillor Green, did you have any questions or comments?
I don't, thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions of staff? Councillor Patterson and Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to staff, I do have a couple of questions, and perhaps even the first one, our mayor can answer. Has this gone out to all the municipalities at the same time, or has consent already been received by any other municipalities, or perhaps more importantly, have there been any objections to the document?
So in terms of coming back to the CRD table, we have not had any responses come back to the CRD board. I can't speak to whether or not any responses have come back to staff at this point, but I'm not aware of any responses to this point.
Okay. As I go through...
Your Worship, if I can jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Haran.
May 13th is when the CRD board was given the opportunity to see this bylaw change, and then very shortly thereafter, the letters were sent out to the core area municipalities that were responsible. Since that time, 5 of them, so Colwood, B. Royal, 4 of them, Colwood, B. Royal, Saanich, and Esquimalt have consented, and 3 have not yet considered the issue. So that's where we are. So that's Langford, City of Victoria, and Oak Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Haran, for that clarity.
Thank you. And if I could just continue. Now, my understanding, I guess, in how the documents are put together is that the asset belongs to the CRD, and it's a conveyancing system that we, members of the CRD, share in. And on the documents, it was shown that Oak Bay's portion of that was 6.13% of what the usage is. In their projections for capital, for the 5 years ending 2025, there was a capital requirement of 53 million, and so if the formula that is used is based on Oak Bay's, that 6% of Oak Bay, that would be a requirement of 3.2 million, kind of for Oak Bay. Has that been projected in our budget for capital? And I know there will be an operating cost too, but so I'm just wondering if this has been taken into consideration in doing our budgets, or it will be something that will need to be considered by council.
And I think that's probably a question more for Mr. Payne as the Director of Finance and Mr. Haran, but you're both on the call, I believe, so you can answer the question, because I think there's some complexity in terms of how this requisition goes forward. It doesn't all fall into one pot. Mr. Payne, do you have the answer for that?
Yes, sir. Your Worship. Yes, our 5-year financial plan forecasts increases to our CRD requisition, approximately 5% a year for the next 5 years. And so, yes, it's a capital expenditure to the CRD. but it's an operating expenditure to us because we simply have to provide a requisition remittance to the CRD. So yes, it has been included there. However, the exact projections have not been integrated into the CRD forecast because until they receive consent on this bylaw, to them it doesn't exist in their forecast. So the forecasts really are using the existing formula for apportionment. But as Director Horan already mentioned, the financial impacts as a result of this bylaw change are not significant. So I would regard generally that the forecast in the CRD financial plan are as accurate as they will be under the new formula.
And one last question, if I could, through you,
Absolutely.
Mayor,
Go
to
ahead.
staff. Just wondering about if we, and I'm sure our engineering department has, but have we undertaken a risk assessment, and is there evaluated any risks to Oak Bay's portion of the system or our continuance of this that is of note?
Mr. Horan?
Well, I think the best way to answer that question, Your Worship, is that we are always in conjunction with our partners in the CRD and the other core area municipalities doing infrastructure risk assessments, both in terms of funding and then performance of the systems. And this change is part of the way that going forward for the next, from now for decades on, is really recognizing the fact that the CRD is being asked to run this service for the 7 core municipalities as a single system. And up until this point, the multiple different ways to consider who's responsible for what and how the requisitions occur and how the costs are gathered and even how decisions are made about prioritization have been less than ideal. So this is actually a step in the right direction. It allows municipal staffs to have an easier way of understanding what the priorities are and where the funding is going to, and it reflects a future-thinking way of treating the regional service.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to staff. Just picking up on the comments from Director Horan and Mr. Payne as well, just in terms of financial impact, and you've both sort of indicated that the financial impact is negligible or small to Oak Bay through this change, and there's not an actual sort of comparison before and after between the two schemes presented in the staff report, and there's probably a lot of limitations as to why that can't happen. But I was just wondering, what is the statement around sort of financial, the financial implications being relatively negligible? What is that based upon, and what sort of information was provided from CRD that leads us to understand that that's the case?
Yes, through your worship, I forgot that I'm not in a council meeting. I should have waited for you to just tell me to go ahead.
It's okay.
So I'll stop.
Go ahead, Mr. Horan.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just sitting in my office with the phone and forgot about the whole protocol thing for a second there. My apologies. Yes, that question, Your Worship, through your worship to Councillor Appleton, when this was first proposed about a year ago, from the CRD staff, many of the municipalities didn't quite understand the complexity and nor the impact. So in the months afterwards, so in the fall and the early winter of fall of 2019, early winter of 2020, there was multiple meetings with CRD staff where we were able to dive into those weeds. So in short, Oak Bay as a municipality ends up doing, if you use, say, the 2018 sewage flows, as a kind of a for all the municipalities, what would things look like in 2018? How would the costs have been different? For Oak Bay, they would have been slightly less by 0.5%, but some of the other municipalities, it would have been higher by 0.5% or close to zero change. So in general, so that's on the operating and the capital side. So that's why most of the municipalities, at least from the staff perspective, see it as a generally the formula change to be of minimal impact financially in the short term.
Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just continue with a couple of more, just small detailed questions. So, we talk a fair bit about infiltration and paying essentially for volume that we don't necessarily want to be contributing because it's stormwater infiltration and volume that we're essentially we contribute more than we're actually generating just in straight sewage to the sewage treatment process. So I'm just wondering, in reference to the incentives to reduce I&I that are laid out in the CRD staff report, is that something that's basically implied to say if you reduce your I&I, you're going to reduce your flows and therefore and therefore how much you're paying? Is it as straightforward as that, or is there some sort of disincentive scheme in there?
Go ahead, Mr. Horan.
See how I was disciplined there, Your Worship. Yes, thank you for the question. I think the answer, the best way to answer that is, in general, each municipality has been prior to the agreements around where the wastewater treatment plant and how the costs are meant to be apportioned. There's a certain design capacity of how much treatment, how much of the treatment plant capacity is meant for each municipality. And so far, the Oak Bay's capacity that we've signed up for and that we've been allocated is more than is necessary in the foreseeable future. So there's a lot of room for well, I shouldn't say a lot of room, but enough room that we have some capability for growth. However, because the costs are allocated based on actual flows, Councillor Appleton is correct. If we are able to drive down the actual flows that end up at the wastewater treatment plant, we're able to reduce the operating costs. And that's a great thing. So the things that impact those flows are water conservation measures. So that's the watering restrictions in the summer and low flow toilets and furnitures and appliances. And then inflow and infiltration. Inflow being extra water in the sanitary sewer system from cross connections and storm systems connected to the sanitary sewer, either accidentally or deliberately. Combined sewers, and finally leaky and broken pipes, and that's the infiltration part. So the tie-in with the other district commitments are around the Core Area Liquid Waste Management Plan, which is reducing inflow and infiltration to levels that are down below 4 times average driver flow by 2030, which is where the combined sewers and the uplands comes in. So all those things combine to say driving down the costs and meeting our municipal wastewater regulation commitments to the province. They're all tied together, and this proposal kind of fits into that strategic plan.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. Just one brief question as a follow-up, and then I'm done. So, Mr. Rand, you mentioned that that there's, I guess, not excess capacity. I'm using the wrong term, but that there is some buffer there in terms of the capacity that we've signed up for. Again, there's language in the agreement that provides for, I guess, surcharges, or essentially an initial charge if the municipality exceeds what it's signed up for. So I'm gathering by your comments that we have a little bit of extra there, that we've potentially signed up for a capacity that would allow us to accommodate sort of our high flows, that we would not generally exceed our target on a regular basis. And I'm just wondering whether you could comment on that, or with our current historical, maybe sort of 5-year tracking, how often we would exceed our what we've signed up for, essentially.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Mr. Horan?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We don't expect to be exceeding our allocations in terms of treatment because it's based on actual annual flows. We have some challenges around because of the inflow and infiltration around some of the peak flows, like on the very wet days, but that's a separate issue. The bylaw change that's being requested does allow some mechanism, which is for the different municipalities, if there's an issue around capacity to buy or sell, I guess is the term, that you could use some of that capacity, which is likely to be used by some of the municipalities that have that experience greater growth. And we don't have any predictions on who that might be, but we don't expect that to be, at least not in the short term, an Oak Bay issue for us.
Thank you, Mr. Horan. And I'll go to Councillor Braithwaite Do you have any questions or comments?
No, I think everything was covered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zelka?
And no questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I just have one. I really appreciate all the thorough questions that were provided by council. Just to Mr. Haran, through me to Mr. Haran, is there a is there any change in the mechanism for service requests? You said it was being dealt with more on a holistic basis, but let's say, for example, we feel there's an urgent need for some work done on the East-West Connector. What would be the mechanism for that, and does it change from the current system of asking and just hoping that they prioritize it?
Your Worship, I think there's two ways that happens. Number one is staff in the different municipalities, but here in Oak Bay, by being aware and connected to the CRD's core area liquid waste planning in terms of operating and capital, we're able to deal on a staff-to-staff level. And then we have representation, yourself, on the core liquid waste management committee, where the decisions that are recommended to the CRD board about funding and prioritization are made. So up until this year, where there was a lot of flux and change related to the wastewater treatment plant and how that was going to finish, there's now a real need for those for that committee and that board to start treating the system as a whole. So I believe that there will be more than perhaps in the past input from staff up through you to that committee to ask the questions and to shape the direction of the service as a whole going forward.
Okay, thank you. And maybe actually one follow-up to that then. Does this, where does this cut off? Does it include the pump stations and the infrastructure in those pump stations as well within this formula?
Your Worship, yes, it includes. So it's the trunk mains. So in Oak Bay, that's the northeast trunk, the Bowker section of that, the East Coast Interceptor, the Humber, Rutland, Hood, and Harling Point pump stations, and then in the other municipalities, there's a whole bunch of other pump stations and other appurtenances and pieces of equipment that are related to the distribution or conveyance of that sewage, and then eventually the treatment of the sewage as well. Okay,
thank you very much. Any other questions, comments at this time? I'm not seeing any, so I will going to call the question. I'm just going to give Councillors Zelka and Braithwaite another 5 seconds to unmute and speak up at this point before I call the question, if they have anything to say.
Councillor Zelka has one quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you so much, Chair. Through you to staff, I was wondering if our Director of Engineering has any knowledge, or possibly the Mayor, with respect to the impact benefit agreements that are being renegotiated with the First Nations, who are, I understand, participants in this solution and service.
Thank you for the question. I don't have anything to add to that, but Mr. Haran, did you have anything to add to it?
Your Worship, I don't have any specific pieces of information. I do recall potentially seeing something in the CRD material related to that, but to be frank, in preparation for this meeting, I've been reading, years worth of background reporting and explanations of what's going on, so I can't quite remember where I saw what. So unfortunately, I have no further information to provide on that situation.
Okay, well, that was the same information I have is in the report. It refers to that expiring and being expected to be brought back on board, but beyond the report, I have no additional information. Councillor Zelka, sorry about that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the information you provided already. That's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll give another 5 seconds in case Councillor Zelka or Braithwaite wants to add anything else. If not, I'm prepared to then call the question. So all those in favor? And Councillor Braithwaite?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We are on to item number 6, which is the District of Saanich Motor Vehicle Act pilot project. I believe this would be Mr. Haran again talking to this item. Mr. Haran, welcome back.
Thank you, Your Worship. We received in March a letter from the Mayor of Saanich inviting Council to direct or to encourage staff to participate in Saanich's work related to a pilot project related to the BC Motor Vehicle Act. The intention there is to seek ways to facilitate potentially future changes that make it easier to do things like municipality or neighborhood-wide zoned speed limits, which is very much in line with district's council's direction on speed limits in Oak Bay. So this just is a memo to capture that information and to seek a recommendation to direct me to participate, please.
Sounds very good. Councillor Green, you had your hand up. Would you like a motion? Please.
I'm prepared to make the recommended resolution that the Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Second.
Sorry?
I was moved and seconded. We'll just move the recommendation. That's fine.
I'll just move the recommendation, but for people that can't see it, I was just going to finish.
Go ahead.
Be encouraged to participate with the District of Saanich planning meetings to explore opportunities, challenges, alternatives, and risks related to BC Motor Vehicle Act pilot project proposals.
I think you moved and seconded. Is there any, so thanks for, it's now live on the table. We can have comments or questions from council. Councillor Patterson, Councillor Green. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I support definitely the intent of this. Just wondering what are the next steps? What does this involve, and how how does this move forward during this this time in meetings? What does that mean for our staff?
Mr. Horan, do you want me to take a stab at this, or are you prepared to answer?
Yes, Your Worship, I'm happy to answer that. Well, the first step is staff-to-staff communications to kind of narrow down the scope of what it is that Saanich is trying to do, and to see if that matches with what Oak Bay would like to do as a municipality. So that initially it's just a matter of, it might be distanced, socially separated meetings, but we're doing a lot of those these days. And then I believe the intake for, or the deadline for, a proposal of a potential study is in the fall at some point. So it would be laying out, this is what, having the municipalities that are involved send a proposal to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure saying, this is the pilot project, this is what we think we're going to achieve, this is how we're going to do it, and then hope for some approval to go ahead and make some changes to how signage is done and how local laws are written, so that you can do things like changing speed limits in a zone as opposed to a sign on every street to try to change the default limits. So that's the first step, is meeting with Saanich and then coming up with, do we have an agreement on what the pilot project looks like, and go from there.
Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
So then just to what I'm hearing then is, although this was not on our strategic plan for this year, this will be a potentially a new item that will be added to it, and could use some resources of our staff time, but not substantial resources this year.
Mr. Horan, did you want to address that?
I will, Your Worship. I'd be happy to. This is definitely one of those times when, if we were to try to do the pilot project within Oak Bay staff by ourselves, we wouldn't have the resources to make this progress. But we're lucky to be able to team up with another municipality that has more resources, so we can obtain the benefits of doing the work without necessarily having to divert resources from other commitments. So in this case, we're constantly doing speed limit, traffic studies, and other kind of transportation safety related work as part of our operational work. And so far, I assess that we'll be able to support this work just within our day-to-day operational commitments.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson and Mr. Horan. Go ahead, Councillor Green, and then Councillor Ney afterwards.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to add my voice to Mr. Horan's voice, and that is that this is a great opportunity for a great partnership. And I know that I'll speak for myself. The most frequent complaints I receive in Oak Bay are regarded to speeding, motor vehicle behavior in neighborhoods, and Mr. Thomas has an email there, I see, regarding stop signs. That's another big one. So I think this is a great opportunity, and I think there would be a lot of support in the community, frankly, for some of the changes that Saanich is looking at. So I'm really pleased about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Ney?
I don't really have anything to add, but just to really support the work of staff to partner with Sanish, because we've really been stuck on this one because of the way the Motor Vehicle Act works. So, and you know, the report shows that the Minister of Transportation has put out this call for pilot projects, which is good because it gets us talking directly with the minister to see how we can sort of debureaucratize some of the Motor Vehicle Act. So I really appreciate the work staff's doing on this and really behind you, because I know the community has been asking for this, and I think we put something forward back in 2016 according to the report, and this is long awaited, and I really do get how this is opportunistic. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Is any other? I'll go to Councillor Braithwaite or Zelka.
I would just reiterate Councillor Ney's comments. It's a great opportunity to partner. I'm very happy to support this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Councillor Zelka, anything, questions, comments?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Similar comments. Very pleased this is going forward. Enthusiastic supporter of this initiative. I know we brought this forward to AVICC, and I've seen it at UBCM a number of times in terms of giving municipalities an opportunity to set either municipal-wide or in the zone area a default speed limit different from, I think, the 50K or whatever, kilometers per hour, or whatever the default is today. Enthusiastic supporter, and want to see this move forward as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we have general agreement on this one, and I do. Before I call the question, I'm just going to express my appreciation to the District of Saanich, who have actually we had our process for this. We looked at it internally. And I'm very appreciative of this of Saanich, not only just raising this as a possibility and going through the process with the province, but also of reaching out to all the regional municipalities for participation, because I believe we'll have the overwhelming majority of municipalities, especially in the core, that will participate, which will make the pilot that much more effective, because having it in a patchwork is difficult. So hopefully all of the members will participate, and we'll see this go forward effectively. I don't see any other comments or questions, so I will call the question then. I'll give another 5-second pause here for Councillor Braithwaite or Zelka if they wish to add anything. Don't hear anything, so I will slowly call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Braithwaite?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
Enthusiastically in favor.
I guess Zelka's registered as just in favor, but we'll take that. All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And on to item number 7. This is the new item on the amended agenda. It was put here in response to an agenda for City of Victoria coming up for the Committee of the Whole and Council later this week. Just to provide information to Council. There's no recommendations here, but Mr. Horan, perhaps I can give it to you for an introduction.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Last year, City of Victoria's Council directed their staff to start on the process for their next stage of their bicycle network design and implementation, which involved choosing some projects and doing some public engagement late in 2019. So those projects are Kings Haltane, Government Street North, Kimta Road, and the issue that affects Oak Bay, which is Richardson Street. And part of the direction for, as I understand it, City of Victoria's council to their staff was to reduce traffic volumes on Richardson Street from about 5,000 to 6,000 vehicles per day, as they've measured it, to a target of 500 to 1,000 vehicles per day, essentially turning Richardson Street into a local street rather than a collector route. So there was a lot of, so these plans were initially made public in the fall, and some of those things that directly affected Oak Bay residents were essentially, the idea was there would be no way to go from Oak Bay along McNeil westbound to Victoria along Richardson Street anymore. So there was a lot of feedback and concerns and questions, and at that time we highly encouraged residents to contact City of Victoria to make their voices heard during that process. In early 2020, District of Oak Bay staff met with city staff to look over some of the results of the engagement process and some of the drafts of the potential changes to their concept designs. And then we were
and then we needed to wait for them to finalize what their plans were and bring them forward publicly for their council to review. But because of the COVID situation, that was delayed, and then only last week, Friday afternoon, the agendas were published for this Thursday's Committee of the Whole. And then the memo just summarizes some of our key points related to the issue, and then and assessments on the impacts to Oak Bay residents.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Horan. And as I said, there's no direction here on this one, but we have an opportunity here we can make motions to reach out to the council in Victoria or do some other mechanisms that we see fit if there's a will of this council. Councillor Green, did I see a hand?
You did, thank you. And I think Mr. Horan and I talked about this last year. I approached him after I had been approached by a number of residents, including a former mayor, Mayor Costin, actually, former Mayor Costin, expressing real concern about this proposal. And it's not because we don't support cycling or the reduction of vehicular traffic in the area, but here are some of the issues that were raised with me. First of all, putting increased traffic on Fairfield. There are 2 schools and 2 parks between Foul Bay Road and Cook Street. This increased volume through school zones would create elevated safety issues, increased air pollution around playgrounds for each of the schools, emergency vehicles going from Oak Bay on a multi-alarm fire, for instance. How would that work? And I think the biggest concern was the lack of consultation with Oak Bay generally. Now, I realize staff have been doing a staff-to-staff consultation, and I really appreciate those efforts. But I would point out in the third paragraph of Mr. Horan's note that towards the end of that paragraph, no formal request for feedback or concurrence was received from the City of Victoria on their proposed plans, despite the fact that it has a major impact on particularly South Oak Bay. My other concern, and the concern shared with me by residents for Richardson, was that there is indeed room for a secure bike lane and with existing traffic flow. It's quite a wide road between Foul Bay and Cook Street, and if you notice, coming out of the uplands on Cadbury Bay Road, there is a secure bike lane there as well that is actually cordoned off from traffic. So safety and security are really good for that particular stretch of that lane, bike lane. Oak Bay Avenue is already congested, east to west, particularly at peak times. And so increasing traffic on Oak Bay Avenue would also spill over, I believe, to Brighton and to Quamachin, both of which are small neighborhood streets. Quamachin is much wider and has traffic calming already on it, but Brighton goes right through 3 or 4 little neighborhoods along there between the end of Foul Bay and Richmond. So there are some other concerns that were raised about the neighborhoods. There are 2 schools in South Oak Bay, St. Michael's University Junior Campus and Monterey Middle School. As well, that would then have implications for Central and Victoria, McNeil, Granite, Hampshire. They would all be impacted by heavier traffic flows if Richardson is eliminated. And McNeil in particular has already long-standing speeding issues, as we know. So those are all of the concerns that were raised with me, and I guess I'm urging some form of feedback or concurrence from the City of Victoria for an ability for Oak Bay to have input on these plans, because and I don't want to go down the path of, gosh, if we're commenting on this issue, that means we're anti-cycling, and that is not the case at all. We have an active cycling community in Oak Bay, and but these are the things that were raised, and I think they're worth considering in our deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Are there any other questions or comments or motions or anything else we want to get to? But Councillor Appleton, Councillor Ney.
Thank you, Your Worship. And if it's appropriate to do so, then yes, I will introduce a motion with respect to this. And the motion does pertain to analyzing and taking steps to improve, should this improvement on the Victoria side of Richardson go ahead, to evaluate McNeil on the Oak Bay side of the border and bring the design of McNeil in line with those proposed improvements. So I would propose the following motion, which is that staff be directed, and this is the most important part, that staff be directed, once the EOC is deactivated, to gather information on possible enhancements to McNeil Avenue in keeping with the Complete Streets Handbook and Toolbox and the proposed layout of the City of Victoria's finalized designs, and return options to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. And just before I call for a seconder, just so I make sure we're not duplicating work or anything here, I'll probably turn this over to Mr. Haran as well, just to see if, my understanding is that there is work going on active transportation things in general. So I just want to make sure this is not duplicating work, or if it needs any clarification from us before it's considered. Mr. Haran?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. If the City of Victoria was to proceed with their plans for Richardson, we would definitely need to do some work here in terms of studying how traffic flows, and potentially make some recommendations for change. And the recommendations might actually come out with things are fine as they are, but we don't know that yet. I think that there will be a period of time where certain streets will be a lot busier than they've ever been, but then things might calm back down again. So it will take some time after that's done, but definitely the direction that's being discussed aligns with what we'd be doing in reaction to Victoria's plan.
I guess the bottom line I'm seeking here is, does the motion provide additional clarity for direction to staff, which is the role of this body? If you don't know, that's an answer too. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure that question was directed at me, Your Worship.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry to you, Mr. Haran. Is that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think that the proposed direction, if the council supports it, is clear and understood by me.
Okay. So there's a motion on the table. Maybe just read it back again.
Sure.
Councillor Appleton.
With pleasure, Your Worship, that staff be directed, once the EOC is deactivated, to gather information on possible enhancements to McNeil Avenue in keeping with the Complete Streets Handbook and Toolbox and the proposed layout of the City of Victoria's finalized designs for Richardson, and return options to Council.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Is there anything you wish to add, Councillor Appleton?
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and I'll just briefly motivate. And in with respect to your comments, I do believe that it is important, and I understand very clearly that staff are working on active transportation options, and Mr. Haran has already mentioned that will be coming before Council, and I'm very appreciative of that. What I expect to happen is, if indeed this is implemented in 2021, as is projected and as staff mentions in the staff report, it's very likely to be a draw for additional active transportation users. The McNeil corridor, as Councillor Green and others have pointed out on other occasions, is already congested. It's a very difficult area to pass, especially near Foul Bay Road. In brief, if the Richardson protected corridor results in increased cycling or increased active transportation modes beyond what we already have, it's very likely that there's going to be issues with that corridor. And I think that we need to be ahead of the curve as far as planning for how we're going to accommodate those users through that corridor if that Richardson improvement comes to pass. So I do think that, despite the fact that I'm aware that staff are working on active transportation options more broadly, I think that time is of the essence with this specific street and in this specific location, because I know that it's already challenging, as some others have pointed out. So.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Green, then Councillor Oh, sorry, I think I had No, go ahead, Councillor Nay. I had you first. Yeah. My apologies.
Before I speak to the motion on the table, I do want to ask a couple questions through you, Mayor, to Mr. Haran, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because, Mr. Haran, you've been involved in the consultations, I'm wondering, they gave us a very, I think it was almost 700-page report of the survey. I have to tell you, I didn't quite get through it all. But so I'm going to cheat and ask you, if you know the degree to which people in Oak Bay participated in the engagement process. They had a survey and a number of other ways of engaging. And I'm wondering if you, in the work that you were doing, became aware of, in any way, the degree to which residents in Oak Bay had some input into the process, because I know the staff from the report they gave appears to have taken all the feedback very seriously, and they went through it in detail and did respond in many ways to the feedback in the places they were able to, and that was all tabulated in one of the reports. So I'm wondering if you could first speak to that.
Mr. Haran, do you know the makeup of the responses?
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you for the question. I did look at that, look through that document. I must confess that I didn't read anything related to Haltane or Kimta or any of those other places, but the things related to Richardson, and I did look at, and there were a handful, I would say, or a number, like not one or two, but more than that, Oak Bay residents or residents who live in the area who commented on issues that affect Oak Bay. It's really difficult as a member of staff to weigh in on how another staff's going to take a whole bunch of feedback from a community and draw conclusions. It's because sometimes it's not, part of it is what are they trying to achieve? What direction have they gotten from their council? So different communities might end up with different recommendations after getting the same feedback from their community. So I think it's fair to say that there were some folks in support in the Oak Bay area, and there were some folks in opposition, but no easy consensus drawn from that process based on what I could see.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Mayor, again, the second question I have, because I know this process of consultation has been going on for quite a long time, if some period, and this plan has been mapped out for some time as well. And I'm just wondering, at any point, are you familiar with, have they done traffic studies on these places? Councillor Green mentioned a number of roads that are projected to, have increased traffic. And are you familiar with any of the work that was done around assessing future traffic patterns on those side roads and even some of the more main arterials, and what those results came out like?
Mr. Haran?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So I believe they would have done standard traffic counts just like we do for Richardson, which is where the 4,000 to 5,000 vehicles per day comes from, I suspect. I haven't seen the results of those, I haven't dived into the data itself because what they provided is summary results. But if what they're trying to do is get vehicles on Richardson down to 500 per day, and that means there's 3,500 or 4,000 vehicle trips per day that need to be sent to Oak Bay Avenue or to Fairfield Road. And like any traffic discussion, it really, how you come down, in my opinion, how you decide what it all means, it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. So in this case, it appears that the City of Victoria is trying to achieve a significant reduction in change in character in Richardson Street, and what they're going to do to achieve that is push the traffic to Fairfield Road and Oak Bay Avenue.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just speak to the motion then too. So, I mean, a lot of consultation has gone on. They've done their work on what's going on, and I guess the way I see this is if this, and they looked at numerous other ways to create this cycling corridor, and this was the option they came up with after consideration of various options, and was the best way to create a safe cycling corridor that would accommodate the most number of cyclists. So I do agree. I'm definitely in support of this motion that should that go through, that we in Oak Bay should quickly, well, I don't know if it's quickly, but we really need to find a way to sync up that McNeil Street, because it is busy, it is congested, it's a corridor where lots of young people are using to cycle to the Monterey, to St. Mike's, and then up to GNS on the Richardson, on the Victoria side. So tidying that up would make that a much safer place for young cyclists who were trying to encourage to use that mode of transportation. And I really think that this corridor is a remarkable opportunity for our community to have a safe way to make their way down to the city center and beyond. If you look at the way this is connecting up, down across the Bay Street Bridge, and now then up to the Goose, it makes it extremely accessible for people to cycle safely. So I think it's in our interest to use the work that Victoria's done to sync up our McNeil Road and contribute and enhance the active transportation mode for Oak Bay.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Councillor Green, and I'll just throw this out there for consideration as we're discussing this as well. This is an interesting motion, and I think it ties a lot to what we want to do as an organization, as a priorities. It presumes something that is going to be decision made at Victoria, and may be best suited until after they made that decision. I think there is also something that we have to consider as well in terms of if we as a body want to consider any further input into that decision-making process, which is happening this Thursday. And I think which is probably the more urgent discussion on that, because this will ultimately, depending on how that debate goes at council in Victoria, will have an impact. So, Councillor Green.
Yeah, I'm going to point out some observations. First of all, I think the timing is very poor on this decision, given that we have just come through a complete lockdown. We are just in phase 3 now of reopening. So I would suspect it would have been very difficult, if not impossible, for Oak Bay residents to have a meaningful opportunity for input. And that is a big concern of mine, is that input from this community, I would hate to see it preempted. And I appreciate the work that Mr. Horan and his staff have been doing, but and I acknowledge that it would be very difficult. As he pointed out, staff in the city of Victoria are planning for their own community. They're not planning for their neighbor, and that's the reality. But the reality is that we have a much older demographic in a much more compressed area. I find it challenging to think that this plan is for all ages and abilities. It is primarily for people who are able-bodied and can ride a bicycle and navigate in that way, or who are active pedestrians. And I appreciate that that's important, and that we need to make navigating our streets safe and enhance for that group. But I also think about the people on scooters, people who cannot walk great distances, people who have challenges in mobility, and so on. So I think we have to be honest about the plan in some respects. And we have an older demographic here. Not everybody rides a bicycle. And I appreciate that, but I don't want to see that those people will be left behind in the kind of active transportation planning that we do. And again, I'm very concerned about the opportunities for input for our residents. I'm not sure what those have been. And I appreciate Mr. Horan's take on that. But I really think time is of the essence, but it feels like a fait accompli to me. And I think that's unfortunate also in terms of good relationships between neighbors. I don't know if the mayor has had opportunities to talk with Mayor Helps on this particular issue, and perhaps you have had, and I'm not aware of that. But this is not only an operational planning issue, this is a political issue as well. And we know that plays a part. So I'm just concerned, and I really don't. And I support Councillor Appleton's motion, by the way. I think there isn't a lot else we can do in this regard, but I would hope that we will have an opportunity, a meaningful opportunity for input from our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to make sure that we're not conflating two things, because I think comments related to what we want to do in terms of Victoria's motion and communication with them, and those things are now essentially set aside as we deal with the motion on the table, which is to presume that goes, if that goes forward, then to direct staff to take on some work. So I just want to make sure we're focusing on the motion here, which is really about what we're directing our staff to do, and we'll leave it at that just for now. And is that Councillor Ney?
Can you have the motion read one more time, please?
We absolutely may. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll see whether I get it right this time. Make sure I read it at the same time every time. That staff be directed, once the EOC is deactivated, to gather information on possible enhancements to McNeil Avenue in keeping with the Complete Streets Handbook and Toolbox, as well as the proposed layout of the City of Victoria's finalized designs for Richardson, and return options to Council. So Council will note that the phrasing of that motion, as has been mentioned, assumes that project goes ahead as it is currently contemplated, and then the finalized design component implies that that project is then implemented.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. I have Councillor Braithwaite or Councillor Zelka. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Councillor Zelka does.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Oh, thank you very much. First, let me just say that I'll be speaking in favor of the motion. I think it's a reasonable thing to do. In fact, many things will have to change if we have this exit from Oak Bay blocked off, essentially, in terms of what our 18 to 19,000 residents will need to do heading down that street. So this being one of many with respect to or I guess you could say this opportunity is presenting itself. I appreciate, first of all, that there's no timeline built into the motion, giving staff an opportunity to slot it in as needed or as able. And I appreciate the fact that the timeline was not built into this motion, which is allowing me to support it. I do also want to point out that with respect to a comment I believe Councillor Green mentioned with respect to fire and other changes that will have to happen. I'm very pleased that in the past year or two, the Oak Bay Emergency Program has been able to win a number of grants through UBCM for the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. And one of the grants won recently has to do with evacuation route planning. So as a result of that, I actually have less concern about this, since I know there's many things happening that will coincidentally be in concert with this rather major change to Oak Bay. So I just wanted to share that as more of a comment as opposed to a question, and I'll be voting in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Anything from you, Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you. Okay, so I listen with interest to the comment.
Oh, Councillor Braithwaite,
Councillor Green started.
You just you broke up a little bit there. Can you just stand on your tippy toes by a window and get yourself coverage, and we'll try that again.
Okay, is that a little better?
It's much better. Thank you.
Okay. I was just saying that I appreciate all the comments from my fellow councillors, and especially the initial comments from Councillor Green. I do have a little bit of a concern here, and my concern is that I think that Councillor Appleton's motion assuming that this goes forward with City of Victoria, is a good motion, and I would normally want to support that. However, in principle, I don't think I can, because it makes the assumption that the City of Victoria is going to move ahead. And what I feel is that we really needed to have further input into that. I mean, when I look at the report from Mr. Haran, and he's talking about, adding 4 to 7 minutes for a trip for somebody from Oak Bay to go to Victoria, or pushing 3,500 car trips onto the roads of Oak Bay, that really raises red flags for me. So I think that before we would put a motion like this on the floor, we would want to go to the City of Victoria and give further input as to our concerns as our municipality, so that we can help, so that we can represent our residents who have concerns about this. I think it's inevitable that we're going to end up, and rightly so, with a good biking infrastructure. I'm just not sure if this is the right thing for Oak Bay right now. So on principle, I'm going to actually vote against this, because I really do feel that instead of this motion, what we should have had was a motion to get further input, give further input to the City of Victoria.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I would point out, generally speaking, if you are supportive of a motion in principle but don't feel there's enough information, generally the motion to go forward with would be a referral motion to a future meeting, subject to more information being available. I'm not saying you have to make that motion or anything, but just procedurally that would be the process. Rather than voting down, that's generally better practice, but I'm not going to put anything in your mouth.
I mean, I'm just not sure if that, if you don't mind me saying, I'm not sure whether that motion would be, I'm happy to make that motion, but I'm not sure if it would be accepted around the table. So I'm happy to make that motion if you feel it has legs.
Nothing to do with me. You make the motion or you don't, Councillor Braithwaite. That's the bottom line. But I'll leave it to you. If not, I'll just move on to the next speaker.
Then I will attempt to make that motion that we gather further information before dealing with this particular motion put on the floor right now.
I'll second that.
If I may just get some clarity of wording, then can we just perhaps refer it to a future council meeting following a decision made by the Victoria Council? Because that would give us a lot more clarity.
That's acceptable for me.
And to the seconder, is that acceptable for clarity? Okay. Thank you. I hate open-ended on that. So, Councillor Braithwaite, anything else you wish to add? Actually, just for my own record here, I just got to make sure I don't breach any protocols on that. Ms. Hopkins, it's okay to debate a motion to refer, is it not?
Your Worship, yes.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure I don't get in any trouble. Anything? I don't hear anything else, Councillor Braithwaite?
No, I think I've stated the concerns that I had.
Okay. So the motion is now on referral, which is debatable. So if anybody else wants to add anything, you can do that, or else I'll call the question.
Yeah, I'm going to vote in favor of that. I think it makes sense to me to do this line of this sequencing. So I'm going to vote in favor of that.
Councillor Green.
I will also support the referral, and I appreciate Councillor Braithwaite's input. It was difficult to know which way to go. I think it was a very good motion by Councillor Appleton, but it's all about the input and engagement. Thank you.
Councillor Appleton, you're the Councillor Patterson. I should go in order of hands here that I see. I saw you first before Councillor Appleton was.
Thank you. And the reason I supported this, because I certainly appreciate there are many more people in the room that are more knowledgeable about this route and bicycle paths in the district than I am. But in listening to all of this, and certainly listening to Councillor Green raising the points that have been brought forward by the community and the concerns, this seems like the logical sequencing of how it should proceed at this time. Although, again, I think Councillor Appleton put forward a good motion, but I think that this is the process that the community would prefer that we followed.
Councillor Appleton, your motion.
Thank you, Worship.
Originally.
Obviously, I'm not in favor of deferral because I'm not clear on exactly what the purpose of deferring is. We're deferring, as far as I can understand, unless council provides more information as to what specifically we will be requesting of Victoria in terms of expanded consultation opportunities. As far as I can tell, the deferral just waits for Victoria to make the decision to essentially to pass and implement this, which is really built into the original motion in the first place. So I guess I would request of council that if we are deferring based on a desire to request additional consultation opportunities or additional information from Victoria, I haven't heard a motion to that effect that requests that information. So I would like to, obviously I'm not in favor of deferral until I know what information we are hoping to receive, we're deferring pending receipt of more information. What is that more information, or what is that additional consultation?
I think if I have the motion currently, it's actually until the Victoria gives their final design to their approval. So that's the motion on hand. If that answers the question. Okay. No further comment. Councillor Green?
Just a question through you to Mr. Horan. What are the opportunities for further staff-to-staff consultation based on what Mr. Horan has not only heard tonight, but also based on what he had summarized at the end of his note, which was helpful? Thank you.
And Mr. Horan, is there any further scheduled consultation?
Your Worship, not that I'm aware of. I think based on the way that the report's written, the City of Victoria staff report, we're really seeking their committee of the whole and then following their council's endorsement of the design concepts. And I think the resolutions are approve the design so that their staff can go on to finalize them and tender them so that they can be constructed in the new year. So I don't believe that there's any further consultation staff to staff that's expected from their end. Okay,
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Horan. I'm just going to say a couple of words here. I think I will support the referral. I think Councillor Appleton is absolutely correct in this, that we're referring it without being clear about what our expectations are, what we're going to do with this. Unfortunately, by just the bit of cumbersome process here at a table of that's formal at council, we can only really deal with one motion at a time. So probably this motion, may have, we had more clarity if we'd had another discussion around some of the what this council wants to do. But I think it's important for us to react to Victoria. But after this motion goes forward, we can have a discussion in terms of if there's anything that this body wishes to do in terms of communications with Victoria or next steps. And by all means, we can always revisit this if depending on that conversation. So any other discussion on this? Is on the referral motion, referring it to future council.
Question from Councillor Zelka.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I won't be supporting the referral because it's simply too passive for my taste. I don't know why we're deferring, and maybe it's related to a possible follow-up motion that you were just made reference to. I don't know, but we're just basically waiting for for Victoria to make a decision. So, which is what the wording appears to say, and that just feels too passive to me. So, for that reason, I'll be voting against.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Murdoch?
Councillor Braithwaite, go ahead.
Thank you. And you stated exactly the reason why I'm putting this motion forward is because the other motion from Councillor Appleton came before I was able to put a motion forward to ask for further, or ask that council give further input. So there will be another motion coming forward.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Referral motions are always a little crazy because they go back and forth on the crux of the question itself. But do I see any other questions or comments? I don't. So this is now, I'll call the question on the referral motion. I'm just again going to give 5 seconds to Councillor Zelka and Braithwaite if they have anything else to add before I call the question. I don't hear anything, so I will call the question again. This is a motion to refer this to a future council following what happens at the City of Victoria. All those in favor? And Councillor Braithwaite?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
In light or in faith that there'll be another motion, I'll vote in favor.
Okay. No qualifications recorded, and those opposed? and Councillor Appleton opposed. So that passes. We're back there again. There's no motion on the table at this point. We're just the yeah. Go ahead, Councillor Ney. Oh, sorry. There's a problem with being in the same room.
My niece just texted me and said wave so that she knows that I'm in here. So I did that, okay?
All right, we can all wave at the niece. Hello. That's great. No, that's fine. I just they're in the middle of asking people if they had anything else, any other motions to make, any other discussion pieces. I think I would like a motion that we can talk to a motion if there's any more, and if not, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda.
So if I might, Mayor Murdoch, I'm not exactly sure how to put this motion on the table because I want to show support for what the City of Victoria is trying to do, but I also want them to understand that for me personally and for others within the community, it might be nice for us to have a little bit more say in exactly what's going to be happening with this proposal. So I'm not sure whether a letter from council, from you, Mayor Murdoch, asking if we can have a little bit further input into the City of Victoria's proposal, or so I'm struggling a little bit with exactly how to word the motion.
Okay, I can get that. I can give an offer if you had, because I was scribbling some notes here. It'll probably come out a little garbled, because you're seeking for the gist of what you're suggesting is you would like council to have a chance to participate in the consultation as a body. This is not as individuals as councillors, but for council itself to review the design and provide feedback. Is that correct? Councillor Braithwaite? Uh-oh.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can now, yes.
Oh, sorry. Yes, that's good wording. Thank you very much for scribbling.
It wasn't really wording. I was just making sure I was getting clarification. I think, and I'll try and read my notes. That council requests the City of Victoria extend consultation to allow Oak Bay Council the chance to review and comment on the design prior to approving the Richardson design.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second that.
If that makes sense. That was my words to you, Councillor Braithwaite. So
Could you read it one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hopefully. Can you, Ms. Hopkins, tell me if I mix this up at all, because I'm sort of jumping around to a different wording here. The council requests the City of Victoria extend consultation to allow Oak Bay Council the chance to review and comment on the design prior to approving the Richardson design. That's my different designs, but there you go.
And I believe Victoria refers to it as the Richardson Street Corridor.
Okay, Richardson Street Corridor. Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite, is that clear enough for you?
I think so. I think that covers what I was trying to say. Yes. Thank you.
And I think, actually, when I asked you the question whether it should be individual or council, I think this is important that it be council, because frankly, all of us have the ability to go and address City of Victoria Council as individuals. So this would be really an ask for us to do a bit more formal comment as a body. Councillor, Councillor Braithwaite, do you want to add anything else?
No, I think I've said everything I wanted to say before, but thank you.
Before we get into too much discussion here, I don't want to also, if this is the will of council, what would this do for, I guess this would just come to a future council meeting, and what would be the expectations, and maybe I'll go to Ms. Varela in terms of staff input on this, because again, we'd be, maybe have to be clear about that before we move this forward.
Just one moment, Your Worship. Thank you. Staff is wondering if council is seeking a delegation from the City of Victoria to attend here and provide you that opportunity, or are you just looking to provide comment to City of Victoria Council? We just need some clarity on your recommendation.
That's a good question. Councillor Ney, you had your hand up?
motion forward, but I'm imagining what I would be looking for here. And I could imagine a presentation about the whole history of this, with us having an opportunity to ask some very direct and pointed questions to understand really, the degree to which people in Oak Bay have been consulted, and some detailed questions on the concerns that have been raised at the council table, to hear directly from those who have been in this fairly long-winded process that has been, yes, both political and very technical. I mean, if you go through the report, they've really done their homework and tried their best to consider the various options. So that would be helpful for me anyways, but.
Okay, Councillor Green?
I would agree. I think a small delegation from the city would be very helpful, and then we could raise all of our individual points and concerns. And I agree that they've done a very comprehensive 700-page report and very detailed planning, and I don't quarrel with any of that. But it has been from their perspective, and I'm not sure how well they understand the perspective of this community. And I think it's important that we articulate that through some process. So a delegation would be great if they were willing.
I mean, generally speaking, I would agree with that asking for that. I don't think that would require a change in wording of the motion, but it would give some clarification to what we're actually asking for. Does anybody object to that idea of having a delegation come and address us and answer questions?
This is Councillor Braithwaite. I think that's a very wise and prudent thing to do, and I would agree with Councillor Nays and Councillor Green's comments on that.
Okay. So I think just will of council doesn't require, from reading the wording I put here, as I recall, I don't think it requires that detail in the motion. We can just make that request. So that's one answer to my original question, which was, can we make this request without adding a lot of work to our staff for reports? Ms. Varela?
Your Worship, perhaps you'd consider calling on Mr. Haran if he had a comment to provide, as he has been the one who's been liaising with Victoria staff.
I am very happy to do that. I just wanted to go to, since you're the boss, I thought I'd go to you first and just check. Mr. Haran, if we were to contemplate having City of Victoria come to us and present, what sort of impact do you see that on your work plan schedule?
I don't. So from Oak Bay staff ability to support, it would just be a matter of from the corporate services side and engineering services side being able to arrange it at a specific council meeting, just like tonight. So I don't see it as something that is outside the realm of what we can support as part of our planning. Okay,
thank you for that. So that's the motion on the table. Is there any other discussion on this motion? Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would not support this motion in the sense that it implies that we run the risk of establishing some kind of precedent that we are indicating to our constituents that should we raise concerns on behalf of constituents, that the City of Victoria is if this is their decision as far as how they manage traffic on their roads, which are clearly within their jurisdiction, they do not need to entertain any commentary from the District of Oak Bay as to how they choose to manage that road network. So it should be very, very clear that we can raise concerns with staff, and we can have that discussion and invite that commentary, but they are under no obligation or no commitment to do so, and nor are they under any obligation by any statute or any requirement to accommodate traffic from adjacent municipalities. So it definitely raises the issue of if you're going to raise an issue and if you're going to convey concerns, then it would be helpful if that was something that was directly within your purview to influence or to have some control over. I don't believe that it does, so I don't want to artificially raise expectations that by having this formal procedure of inviting staff that it will necessarily result in anything.
Any other comments? I will save just for the record. I think it's worthwhile for us to do this. I think anytime that a couple of things. One, the decision to use Richardson was a political decision. The council decided on the route and then directed staff to come up with options for it. I think we have an obligation as a pure political body that hasn't been consulted to ask that we be consulted on it. I think that's just reasonable request. And I also think that it does have such direct impact on us that it's reasonable for us to ask. And Councillor Appleton's absolutely right. There's no obligation for them to consider any concerns that we might raise or consider any suggestions that we might have. But I think also, given the commitment that this body has made to active transportation, and I think this, the support for the motion that Councillor Appleton made, recognizing we need to make those changes on the McNeil side as well. Having a discussion before the design is finalized makes a lot of sense. It allows us to have that discussion instead of we can flag our concerns or ideas, and staff can take that back for their council's consideration. But I think it's just in the best interest of the region and of our constituents in Oak Bay to make sure that those potential issues are at least acknowledged and raised to that body before they make that decision, if possible. And hopefully they'll give us that chance. So I'd be supportive of that motion. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Green?
Just really quickly, I go back to Saanich and a previous item on our agenda tonight and how pleased we are that they reached out to us in a partnership way. And I think that's best practice in my opinion. So I think there is a good example there just a few minutes ago. Thank you.
Councillor Ney and then Councillor Patterson.
I guess my comment really is that it's a really unusual process because Victoria does have jurisdiction over the decision that they're considering this week, but we work in a region and we're shoulder to shoulder, and so it does make sense that that there is some due consideration about the impact on Oak Bay. Now Oak Bay residents have had an opportunity to have input. This has been advertised, broadly, and there has been that opportunity. But I do agree that as a body here, there are still questions that belie, councillors here, so that probably are for residents as well. And I don't see there's harm in having this, if they were willing to come forward and help us understand this in more detail. There's no harm to improve our understanding of the basis of the decisions and what that means for our community, and to have an exchange back and forth, that they can hear us and we can hear them, and just to move the process forward. So I think it's a reasonable piece to this fuller process that we do just that.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Mayor. And just to springboard off of what Councillor Ney has presented, I certainly appreciate the motion put forward by Councillor Appleton. It is entirely realistic of the authority and the intent of what the City of Victoria wants and has the right to do. And I don't think any of us refute that. And we may very well be coming back to taking that advice after we get something presented from the City of Victoria. But I share also the desire to have the City of Victoria have the opportunity to improve our understanding, present to us all of the avenues that they have explored and what their rationale is for providing this as, in their opinion, the best alternative for us, so that then we can work from a better informed and hopefully improved understanding of what we want to achieve for this district. And it will at least convey to residents also very clearly how the City of Victoria has arrived at this decision and where we go from here.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Are there any other comments? Councillor Zelka or Braithwaite?
I'm good, thank you.
No,
Okay.
I'm good as well.
So we have the motion on the table, which Ms. Hopkins, do you want to read it back just so we're all clear on what we're voting on?
That council requests the City of Victoria to extend consultation to allow Oak Bay Council the chance to review and comment on the design prior to approving the Richard Street corridor design.
Richardson Street corridor design, is that right?
The Richardson Street corridor
Okay.
corridor design, yes.
Bit of a mouthful, that one. Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands up for comments or questions, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Braithwaite?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
Okay, so we have Councillor Appleton opposed. Otherwise, it's gone forward. So we'll see how they react to that request and move it forward. Thank you very much for the thoughtful discussion, everybody. These are always difficult when they're last minute like this, coming to council without a clear recommendation, and frankly, a little outside of our jurisdiction. Up number 8, maple tree removal. This is not currently recommended for decision, just for the receipt of information, but it's of sufficient community interest that important to have it here on the table. I believe we have Mr. Hidley in the council chambers in person, so we'll just give us a second here to invite him in. Here he comes.
And a question on a point of procedure from Councillor Zelka.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
I apologize. Back to item number 7. Did we actually receive the report? I don't recall.
We did not formally receive that report. So
do we need to?
Ms. Hopkins is shaking her head, but maybe I'll get you just to say something on the microphone so people at home can get an answer. Ms. Hopkins?
Your Worship, there's no requirement to formally receive that. Council has provided direction and staff will act up.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka, for raising that, though. It's always good to be sure that we're right on these things. Mr. Hidley, our manager of parks, is here to join us. Welcome, Mr. Hidley, and you have a report in front of us that outlines these maple tree removals.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Welcome.
Any questions on the maple tree removal? It's relatively straightforward.
Best presentation ever. Great job.
Good. As you know, 2 came down on the corner of Hampshire and Oak Bay Avenue last week, and that was to accommodate a new perimeter drain, but was also causing trips. And there's 4 that we've identified that really need to be addressed, and the remedial work has been exhausted for the most part in regards to what Public Works can do with concrete shaving, etc., to accommodate the trees any longer.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions of Mr. Hidley? Councillor Patterson, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to Mr. Hidley. This is going to not add to the attractiveness of the street in the short term. Of course, we all know that. If Mr. Hidley could give us some insight into the timeline for carrying out this work, I have, as district staff, have worked quite considerably over the last while to get some of the businesses reopened and assisting them, and we've had a few changes in the appearance of the street and how traffic maneuvers and whatnot, and so this will be again a little more upheaval on the street. So I'm wondering if we could kind of have a timeline of what this project would span, how it would roll out, and perhaps how you're going to manage it in the next week or 2 with all of the other changes on the street. Thank you.
Mr. Hidley.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. The timeline is flexible, and I have had a conversation with one of the individuals with the Business Association, and certainly the disruption to business needs to be kept to an absolute minimum. It's not pressing, but it is a problem that has been certainly identified that needs remediation. So we would do our utmost to accommodate all of the businesses along the avenue to minimize any of the disruption.
Thank you, Mr. Hidley. Councillor Appleton?
Well, thank you, Worship. And through you to staff, I'm just wondering whether there's any opportunity to, and I see the mention of root barriers, is there any opportunity to or potentially need, depending on species selected. But is there an opportunity to expand soil volume when we do this? Like, is it possible to excavate out and potentially provide some additional soil volume when it's removed?
We certainly plan to along Hampshire Avenue, Councillor Appleton, and what we would do there is make a structural soil, which is essentially drain rock with soil particles, with the actual planting pit, which would be 4x4. The existing planting pit would be the same size, which would be full of topsoil. The structural soil will support poured in place concrete sidewalk, so it work well. So that it's not a perfect soil mix, but the new trees that we have selected are of smaller variety and are better behaved in regards to their root aggression. So I anticipate that they'll be quite happy there for a period of time without doing the damage that these have, the maples.
Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just a quick follow-up, just what size and sort of caliper size and size of proposed trees that you're looking for replacements? Like what's the target replacement size?
We have found some for the Hampshire side, and they're a type of magnolia, deciduous magnolia called Galaxy. They flower beautifully, and they would be about 7 centimeters in diameter. So they'd be presentable when they appear on the street, but certainly not as offering as much of a visual size as the maples that were there. So the two trees that we have been thinking for the avenue are a type of dogwood called Venus and another magnolia.
Thank you. Are there seeing any other questions? Councillor Braithwaite or Zelka?
No, thank you. Just thank you for a great report, and I look forward to seeing what the trees are going to look like when you replace them.
And from Councillor Zelka?
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Oh, thank you, Chair. So once we clean up Oak Bay Avenue, I can already foresee folks along the Estevan Village area wanting to see their area also addressed. Did the staff want to address any of the trees along Estevan at this time, or? And I'm fine if the answer is no.
Mr. Hadley?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Not right at this time, but we know that there are one or two that certainly need to be addressed. Some of the larger oaks have come to our attention with some issues, health issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. No, I appreciate all of those questions. Not seeing any other hands. I didn't have any questions for this item, but I do now that somebody else asked the question. Just in terms of that mitigating disruption, is it the intention that you'll sort of essentially take up that whole area, put down a tree, and then pour new concrete, so it's essentially back to pristine at the time of completion, or is it to sort of leave that in stages over time, Mr. Hidley?
Thank you, Your Worship. We certainly plan to do it as quickly as possible. So I'll use the Hampshire side of the Scotiabank. So once the drainage work is completed, we plan to install the trees very quickly, and then the Public Works concrete crew will be in to finish the sidewalk.
Okay, thank you. And is there a time window for planting? Like, do these have to go in during this summer so they have enough time with leaf on to root, or is there a time of year that they should go in?
Fall is better, but we have located trees on the island that have been pre-dug and are just waiting in sawdust. So they'll go through a little bit of a transitionary period, but they should establish well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the information. I don't see any other questions, so we just need a motion to receive.
Move receipt. Moved
and seconded by Councillor Green. Thank you. And any other questions, comments? I'll go again another 5 seconds for Councillor Braithwaite and Councillor Zelka if they have anything else to add. I don't see any. I will then call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Braithwaite, Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
And in favor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hidley, for the report. And I know that's going to be a very strange shift. I hope we get the largest trees we can. That's a really iconic view along there of those trees. So thank you for all the work that you're doing there.
Great, thank you.
All right, moving on to item number 9 on the agenda package, we have the tree protection bylaw. Kind of ironically, Mr. Heidley, you're here for that as well, with a couple of suggested changes and a temporary provision. Go ahead, please.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll let you know that since the bylaw was adopted in mid-March, the new bylaw, we have processed over 130 permits. Most of these were for tree removal, the trees that were dead, diseased, and dying, and pruning, of course. We have also implemented the canopy cover requirements that are in the bylaw for new builds and major renovations, and that has gone, from my perspective, better than planned. There's been very little pushback in regards to what is required for a canopy cover. But one thing that did come up, came to light quite quickly, was the amount that we were requiring for security for new builds and major renovations in the form of the $200 per meter squared, which was, depending on the cost of the actual development, a little bit rich. The first one we did was approaching $50,000. So we looked at that and we felt that that was unfair, considering some renovations would be in the $100,000 range to put that type of a security down for canopy cover requirements. So we came up with something that would be a little bit more fair, because we certainly wanted all the developers on board, and I will say that they have been in regards to this, and certainly individuals that are doing house renos. And that would be $500 per tree. That would be required as security. That would certainly have to be planted to achieve the defined canopy cover targets in the actual bylaw itself. So the bylaw in it itself, it would be amended by deleting section 10(13). So in the amount equal to $200 for each square meter of canopy not achieved, that would be replaced with in accordance with the fee specified in Schedule A of the bylaw, which is $500. And people are on board with that, and we've had support. Both with the tree permitting process and with the process of new builds and major renovations, we've had pretty good buy-in. So that was the first one, and the second one would be a short amendment in regards to being able to offer residents some financial relief during the pandemic for the $500 requirement that is asked as a security for trees that are dead, diseased, or dying. And that has come up not that often, but certainly often enough to say we should have a look at that and see if we can accommodate that ask.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heidley. I much appreciate the report. Over to Council. Are there questions of Mr. Heidley? Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Heidley, for the recommendations. Certainly the first one does make sense. On the recommendation that while the provincial state of emergency due to COVID-19 pandemic remains in effect, and there'd be a demonstration of financial hardship, could staff perhaps explain how that would be demonstrated? Like, it leaves it up to their judgment. Well, I don't doubt that they certainly can go to the lot and identify what trees need to be removed, but it's just that if you're basing it on terms of financial hardship, that gets a little more complex.
Mr. Heidley.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. At this time, it's through dialogue, where the individual has expressed a loss of job or certainly some elements of financial hardship through their business through COVID. And that is taken into consideration by our staff, and a decision is made that way at this time.
Okay.
And I will add that it's a very small percentage of our permits. The vast majority of the people that When we tell them that there is a replanting requirement and there was a $500 deposit that is held by us for 1 year that's returned after the tree is well established, are very supportive of that. They think the concept is good, and they certainly understand that it's the way to go considering how many trees that we know we have lost that haven't been replanted since we've been keeping track on private lands.
Thank you, Mr. Headley. Councillor Patterson?
Just as a follow-up to that, I am wondering then if there has been any problems in identifying trees perhaps on private property that we know are diseased or dying, and there's also a hardship in paying the cost of removing the tree itself, because that's also a considerable amount.
Mr. Headley?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Not very often.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of Mr. Headley? Councillor Braithwaite? Or Councillor Zelka? I heard your voice. Go ahead.
If I may, thank you, Chair. It's Councillor Zelka. A quick question through you to staff. I want to thank staff very much for the preamble and the statistics in general provided in a preamble to this report. I'm always very interested in seeing the number of trees that have been both removed and replanted on public and private lands. A quick question, and this is more of a yes/no question. I don't want to surprise staff with this question in any way, and if it is a surprise, by all means, don't feel obligated. But I couldn't help but notice up here in North Oak Bay that we have some utilities, BC Hydro and other utilities who also, through their franchise rights, they have an ability to take down trees. So the quick question, which is more of a yes/no question, are we also tracking those trees that are coming down, and is there a replacement requirement for those?
Yes, we are tracking them, and no, there's not a replacement requirement for them at this time. I know the tree that you're referring to, and a tree will be replanted for that particular species. When it comes to Hydro's jurisdiction over our trees and the utility right-of-ways, we don't really have a lot of say other than to complain loudly sometimes, which we do.
Okay. That's very helpful, and I appreciate you continuing to complain loudly. Thank you.
And I will say for all councillors and staff, if there's amplification of that voice to BC Hydro, I can help with that as well. I think that's part of the role that council can play, is to amplify some of those concerns to the higher levels of BC Hydro if possible. So if that, or other partners that are in place. I think for the most part the relationship is good and they tend to try and help, but if that's ever needed, throw that out there, Councillor Green.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but through you to Mr. Heidley, I really appreciate that you have created an atmosphere of incentive to, save and replace and preserve trees. And I like the approach that you take. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for the report.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
And sorry, I started to ask if Councillor Braithwaite had any other questions at this time.
I don't, but I'd be more than happy to move adoption of the resolution as laid out in the report from the Manager of Park Services.
I think we have to actually do that a bit more formally because their bylaw changes. So if I could just get the reading, that bylaw 4742 be amended as follows. Maybe not all the details, but at least break them apart. Just because I think they're substantially different, I'd rather do it that way. If there's, Ms. Hopkins, do you have any objection to that approach? Okay, so if you don't mind, Councillor Braithwaite, I'm going to bring that into this room if there's someone here willing to make the motions, just because it's a bit easier for me to manage it in room.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, so this is a motion by the first part of the motion 1 and 2. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, moved and seconded. Just so we're clear, this is the first half before the end further than that we're referring to on the report. Any other discussion? I don't see any. Can I just ask one question of Mr. Heidley? It's not directly related to my supporting this piece, but I am curious. Have you had any feedback on the way of calculating the DBH at the height for multi-stem trees? I heard I think the rumors going around that it's so easy to capture that you capture small, but in reading the bylaw, it appears that it's quite reasonable, and it's the 3 largest trunks of a multi-stemmed tree. Have you had any feedback from the development community or homeowners that it's causing problems to using the three largest trunk model?
No, we haven't, Kevin. No.
Okay.
Or, sorry, Your Worship.
That's just fine. Someone just mentioned it to me. I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I went and read it and I didn't see the issue. So I think it was an improvement over what we had before.
And it was.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right, then. Any other discussion on the motion? I'll give 5 seconds again for those in the void. Not seeing any. Okay, we'll call the question then. All those in favor? Councillor Braithwaite?
In favor.
Councillor Zalka?
In favor, yes.
Okay, and then can we get the motion for and further then? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson, if you're ready.
Sorry, I lost my...
And move that council adopt, while the provincial state of emergency due to COVID-19 pandemic remains in effect, the manager of Parks and Services be authorized to waive the replacement tree security fee as outlined in Schedule A to the Tree Protection Bylaw 2020 on a case-by-case scenario where, do you want me to read all the rest?
No, it's fine. Just where is laid out in the report is fine. And I get a seconder from Councillor Green?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion on this portion? Councillor Braithwaite or Zalka? Not hearing anything. I will then move to call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Braithwaite?
In favor.
Councillor Zalka?
In favor.
Okay, so that passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Hidley, for that. And I actually just want to express my appreciation for all that bit of work. But I think the portion of giving people some relief when needed is a really big one, because even that $500 can be a lot of money to people if they're in a crunch time. So thank you for doing that. Moving on to the agenda, then we're on to the protection.
Your Worship, I'm
Oh,
sorry to interrupt. I just would respectfully request that we do 3 readings of the bylaw to amend the tree protection bylaw.
Okay, thank you. I didn't see that on the report, so that was where I was kind of missing my piece. So I've missed it. So can we get 3 readings of the amendment to the bylaw?
Move first reading.
Move to first and second would be fine.
Move first and second reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion here at second reading? Councillor Braithwaite or Zalka, speak up if you wish to.
No.
Okay, seeing no discussion then, I will then come back to this table. Nothing. I will call the question. All those in favor of second reading? Opposed? Councillor Braithwaite?
In favor.
Councillor Zalka?
In favor.
Okay, now I'll ask if nobody's opposed. Everybody's put up their hand, so we're good. And then we move third reading.
Move third reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. We don't usually debate third reading, but I will give a chance if anybody wishes to speak up. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Braithwaite.
In favor.
Councillor Zalka.
In favor.
Okay, and everybody put up their hands, so there's none opposed. That passes. Anything else, Ms. Hopkins, that I have missed on that particular item?
Your Worship, you're all complete.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. My apologies for that. We now have up item number. I'm just going to take a quick moment here, and just for anybody who's listening right now and can't see, we have a staff member coming in just to clean the microphone that is being used by guest speakers, and the chair and table are being wiped down to ensure that they are all safe for the next person that might come into this. And I will say thank you, Mr. Anderson, for doing this. If I may just tell a little story while this is going on, because it really struck me when the municipal order, or the ministerial order came down asking us to do every effort possible to make this room ready for the public. I came in and there was almost every director hauling furniture around, laying tape on the ground, and working out things. This is the very sleeves rolled up, hands-on nature of our management team. Just sort of all hands on deck when things need to be done. They're there. So I really appreciate having a director cleaning our station here. This is very, very much appreciated. All right, moving on to item number 10. Then the procedures bylaw 2020 amendment. Ms. Hopkins or Ms. Varela, who's speaking to this? Ms. Hopkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is requesting that Council consider adoption of the 3 readings we gave previously. And this is to allow to replace the section on electronic participation in meetings currently in our procedure bylaw, which is fairly pertinent at this time as we don't know how the course of this pandemic, so that we can remove the restrictions so that council can continue to make quorum and continue handling the business as necessary.
Okay, thank you. So we've had first, second, third reading of this already. So the next motion would be to adopt. It's kind of odd. We don't normally debate on adoption, but given the gap here, I think it's appropriate to take questions, comments, and if there's requirements for change, we would revert back to second reading again if necessary. Are there any questions or comments from council on this item?
Question from Councillor Zelka.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. Question through you to staff. Just particularly with respect to 4.2, I just wanted to clarify that when it talks about the electronic meetings must permit the meeting participants to hear each other, I presume this is referring to sort of minimum requirements. And what I'm sort of getting at is, I guess I was spoiled by that wonderful Microsoft Teams meeting we were in last, where we had a chance to not only hear but also see and share screens and whatever potentially could happen. So I just want to ask, it just seems to describe minimum requirements, but if there were more options available within the electronic means, I presume those would be available to us.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I'll put that question to Ms. Varela.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just as Councillor Braithwaite and Councillor Zelka are participating via teleconference tonight, this does speak to that as a minimum. Again, as noted earlier, we are considering other options, but I think if council chose to adopt this, and we did have to have 3 council members participate electronically via teleconference, that's really the idea if we have to increase that participation. So Councillor Zelka is correct in that it is a minimum as you're currently experiencing tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Varela.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I may, just as a follow-up to that, there was discussion earlier about looking into options and tools for improving the visibility and access to the public and things. Is that part of this as well, that option? Because I know we have issues with broadcasting, webcasting, and having video conference tied in. So is that going to be looked at as well in that procedure?
It very well could be, Your Worship. There may also be a budget impact that we would have to bring back to council. So again, unknown at this time, but staff will go forward with that solution-oriented approach and do some more research and keep us moving forward.
All right, as you always do. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so we have, I just at this point then, since we've, Councillor Braithwaite, anything else you wish to add? Not hearing anything.
Not at this time.
Okay, so we need a motion for adoption.
I'll move adoption that council adopt bylaw 4750, procedure bylaw amendment 2020.
Is there a seconder? Someone in the room?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Before I call opposed, Councillor Braithwaite.
In favor.
Councillor Zelka.
In favor. Thank you.
And not putting up a hand for those at home does not mean it means you're in favor unless you vote directly in the negative. But I just didn't see one hand, so I'm just going to ask: is there anybody opposed? None opposed. Okay, so that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And item number 11, which is the Sustainable Procurement Policy Delegation of Authority. Oh, it's such a long title. Administrative Functions Bylaw Amendment Bylaw. And I'm assuming this is Ms. Hopkins again? Oh, it would be, of course, to be Director Payne because of the delegation. Mr. Payne, our Director of Finance, if you wish to, if you're on, could you give a quick overview of this item?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just prefer to call it the purchasing bylaw and policy. It's much more succinct, but it is what it is. Staff have made some proposed amendments to the Delegated Authority of Administrative Function bylaw. This is essentially our bylaw that delegates the authority to certain staff members to purchase and bind the corporation in contracts. The changes reflect positions that have been approved and considered in the financial plan bylaw. And so the bylaw now reflects, if adopted, will reflect those positions. As well, the policy proposed policy amendments include the inclusion of those positions, as well as some previous direction from Council regarding a disclosure of awarded contracts. So staff are recommending that Council give the first three readings to this amending bylaw today, and with full adoption at a future Council meeting, as well as approval to the amended policy tonight. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Are there any questions of Mr. Payne? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to staff. I think I understand entirely the intent of what we are trying to achieve, but I'm not sure that I am totally clear on the mechanics of this. So we have a sustainable procurement policy, which I support. Does this sustainable procurement policy in fact replace an existing purchasing policy?
Mr. Payne?
Through Your Worship, that is correct. The sustainable procurement policy is our purchasing policy. So it's simply an amendment to that purchasing policy, and this version of the purchasing policy was adopted in the early parts of this year. So it is our purchasing policy, but just keep in mind that the authority to purchase cannot be delegated by policy. It has to be delegated by bylaw. So that's what the bylaw accomplishes, and then the policy speaks to the mechanics of how the district actually goes about purchasing.
Okay, that clarifies that. Thank you. Now, if we are going to call this a sustainable procurement policy, I notice we don't have any identifier system for cataloging our policies and cross-referencing them to the bylaws. But if we are going to refer to this as a sustainable procurement policy, does it follow that in the bylaw itself it would also be referred to as the sustainable procurement policy and not just the purchasing policy? Just for clarity, on a go-forward basis.
Mr. Payne?
Through Your Worship, from a staff perspective, that clarity, there would be no opposition to that clarity.
Okay. Are they labeled differently currently, Councillor Patterson? I'm not aware.
Yeah, the bylaw just refers to the purchasing policy because that's what originally was, and so I did not completely understand. Was there a purchasing policy that this was replacing, and therefore I'm looking for a follow through of continuity of wording in the documents, just for clarity, because in the future we may not be here. Maybe somebody else that doesn't know we've done this.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for flagging that, Councillor Patterson. Anything else? Okay, Councillor Green. Okay, asked and answered. Thank you very much. Very good. Councillor Patterson.
I do have one other question, somewhat related, although not directly to this, for staff, and that is for the policies that we are putting forward. The sustainable procurement policy definitely sets out a guideline for how purchasing will take place. So do employment contracts and job descriptions for the district include the policies that the incumbent in a certain position will acknowledge as having received and understood?
We're getting a bit into the weeds of the HR pieces here, but I think it's just good to know that we're being consistent in our operational pieces. Ms. Varela?
Not at this time, Your Worship, but it is anticipated that key policies would be included as part of an onboarding package that's currently being developed.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Thank you, Ms. Varela. Anything else here? I don't see any other questions from this body. Are there any questions from Councillor Braithwaite or Zelka?
I have one. Councillor Zelka.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. The first has to do with the actual Administrative Procedures Bylaw itself. I see the link in the agenda has the consolidated bylaw, and it was a lovely blast from the past in the other elements of this bylaw to see municipal administrator, municipal clerk referenced as existing positions within the district. Or I was wondering if staff, as my first question, could indicate whether that's a problem with our old positions being referenced in this bylaw, and maybe also indicate why they weren't updated as part of this refresh.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I will turn that over to staff. I didn't go back and reread the bylaw attached, so I will give it to staff to have an answer. This is the Administrative Procedures Bylaw 2004, consolidated, if that's correct?
Yeah, so the one where Section 7 was replaced, yes.
Ms. Hopkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. So from what I can see in the past, it would be a massive undertaking to amend every single one of your bylaws when an officer or title changes within the municipality for which they've had delegated authority for. And an officer's renaming bylaw had occurred, which allowed all of the bylaws that referred to the municipal administrator and the municipal clerk and a host of other title changes that had occurred at the time to be updated, and henceforth be every time you see a reference to municipal administrator, it means the chief administrative officer, and so on.
Does that answer the question, Councillor Zelka?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that answer. I understand it's a fair bit of work, and of course, during this time of pandemic, this is probably not the time to be doing all those sorts of cleanups. But because the bylaw was opened for Section 7, I thought maybe Sections 5 and 4 could also be updated amongst others. But that's fine. It's not critical, but I do appreciate the answer. The second question I have, if I may.
Go ahead.
I appreciate, Chair, that at the beginning of this meeting, you indicated that for the Special Oak Bay Council, we will not be having a new business section, and that probably at the next meeting where we get back to more normal procedures, we'll include new business and places for things like notice of motions to be voted upon, for example, or to be put forward. So with respect to that, I'm very much looking forward to Councillor Patterson's notice of motion, which is currently in, waiting for a proper regular council meeting to come forward. With respect to this bylaw around procurement policy, I think it's quite reasonable to suggest or to indicate that the suggested financial governance and oversight committee in that notice of motion is related to this sort of thing. So I just wanted to simply say that as a comment, that since we can't vote on that now, I'm definitely looking forward to it at a later time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Zelka. I'm not sure that's just really a comment, not a thing, but is there any sort of follow-up from staff in terms of where that's sitting right now, Ms. Barilla?
Staff did acknowledge that direction had already been provided to staff in a former meeting, so it certainly is on the books, and we'll be bringing that back for council's decision making.
Ms. Barilla, you may not know the answer to this off the top of your head, but we've enacted I think a significant improvement to our transparency here of just having reports. They were quarterly, I think, in normal times, of motions that had been made by council, things that were on the table that staff were actively working on. Do you have any sense, is there a timeline attached to when we might see the next one of those? Granted, recognizing that not much has moved forward from last time, but perhaps still worthwhile to have that come back here for these kind of questions.
That will be part of the Q2 reporting that's coming up in July, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. And I didn't mean to interrupt your stream of consciousness there, Councillor Zelka. Anything else?
Chair, I know you appreciate if I try to be succinct, so I will stop right there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Zelka. Any other pieces on this one? I'm losing track of what we're supposed to be doing here. So, since I've just lost my screen here, Ms. Hopkins, are we looking for motions to do first three readings of this bylaw then? Is that correct?
Your worship, yes, we're looking for 3 readings of the bylaw and potential approval of the policy.
Okay, thank you. So if I can do those separately, then that makes sense to me. So if I may have a motion.
Move first and second reading.
Move first and second reading of the bylaw, seconded by Councillor Green.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion, comments? Councillor Braithwaite or Councillor Patterson, I'll go there first.
So are we doing the bylaw, just for clarity, are we doing the bylaw now as opposed to the procurement policy?
Correct, and I apologize. I'm trying to get this back up in a way that actually works. I keep getting the wrong thing popping up on my screen. So I'm going to go to Ms. Hopkins here in terms of the first and second reading I've got of the bylaw change.
Yes, that's what, yes, we have a motion for first and second. So we're looking for the 3 readings on the bylaw as well as the approval of the amendment to the policy.
So I'm going to do the bylaw changes first procedurally and then the bylaw, then the policy change, if that's acceptable to, yeah, okay, thank you. So yeah, we're dealing with the bylaw changes at this point. This is the chance to make comments, Councillor Patterson, if you, if you wish to.
My comment is on the sustainable procurement policy, which follows through into this, so I have to think about this.
Okay. Fair enough. We have the bylaws first, so I will we'll deal with that at this time. Any other discussion, questions? Councillor Braithwaite or Zelka, any additional comments or questions on the first and second reading of the bylaw?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Then back to this table. Seeing none, I will call the question of first and second reading. All those in favor? Councillor Braithwaite.
In favor.
Councillor Zelka.
In favor.
Okay, we can then do third reading, and if it gives Councillor Patterson any comfort, we will of course not do adoption until we've heard the piece on the policy, and that can change your consideration. So we again don't normally debate third reading, and I will always look for people who jump up and just have a last minute thought, but I don't see any, so I will move this. Can I get do we have a mover of third reading? Not yet. Can someone move third reading?
Move third reading.
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, councillors. And okay, I'll just call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Braithwaite?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
Okay, thank you very much. We had hands up for all around, so no, I keep, by habit of people being in the room, ask for in favor and opposed, but I'm trying to just ask people's votes and then ask for the opposition at the end. And then we have the policy piece, so I can get a motion there.
I will move adoption of the amended sustainable procurement policy.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Ms. Hopkins, I want to make sure that it's just, I've lost my piece here. Is that the correct wording?
Your worship, adoption is fine. Approval or adoption is fine.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I had no reason to doubt that. I just want to make sure. Any discussion on this item? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. And on page 5 of the sustainable procurement policy, under section 4.3, bracket 5, it says issue and in quotation marks standard district approved template documents. There is no section of definitions or glossary in this document, as quite often there are. And so to have issue standard with that in quotation marks, I don't know that has the clarity that I would like to see in this type of a document, but perhaps there's an explanation of what our standard is.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. This would go to Mr. Payne, if you're on the line.
Thank you, through your worship, and Councillor Patterson correctly notes there isn't a definition included in the purchasing policy, and so no, it's undefined at the moment. However, to provide a bit of clarity to council and the public that may be listening, we have a corporate purchaser who has produced a number of templates for purchasing competitions and contract templates, and that's essentially what we're referring to here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Sorry, just for my clarification, by that you mean essentially that for procurements of like type, there is a standard methodology and wording attached to that. Mr. Payne, is that
Yes, Your
correct?
Worship, thank you. And there's consideration of standard legal terms within competitions as well as contracts that are incorporated into those templates for important reasons. So that's why those templates have been developed.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Patterson, anything else? Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments at this time when you have a motion on the table? Councillor Braithwaite or Zelka? Not hearing anything from them. That's great. We'll come back to this table. Seeing no other hands up, I will call the question then. All those in favor? Councillor Braithwaite?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
Okay, so that was I think I saw hands up for everyone, so that passes unanimously. Then we have water rates bylaw amendment, and Mr. Payne, is this yours again?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Council will recall in late 2019, Council adopted water rates for 2020 pursuant to the water rates bylaw. Unfortunately, due to a clerical error, the fourth reading bylaw copy that was attached to the agenda was incorrect. I do apologize sincerely for that mistake. It had some rates that were slightly different than what the first, second, and third rates were. And just for transparency, the district has been using the rates that were embodied in the first, second, and third reading. So there is no financial impact to the ratepayers, but staff are recommending for transparency and out of abundance of caution that council adopt those water rates from beginning to end again. So today we're recommending that council give the amendment bylaw a first, second, and third reading. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And I actually do appreciate that level of transparency. I think is very important. Obviously, we didn't notice at the time. Nobody else would probably notice it, and we're doing it all right. But better to be upfront. The joy of being transparent. So I'm going to get the motion on the table, and we can have a debate if there's any. Move first and second.
Move first and second reading of water rate bylaw amendment number 2. It is number 4762.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions of council? Councillor Braithwaite or Zelka? Not hearing any. I will come back to this table. Last chance before I call the question. Seeing none, all those in favor? And Councillor Braithwaite?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
Okay, it's unanimous. We then move to third reading. If someone can move third reading.
Move third reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded, thank you. Again, not normally any debate. Last chance to jump up. Nope. All those in favor? Councillor Braithwaite?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
All right, thank you. That passes unanimously. And then we have another one I think will probably pass unanimously, which is a motion to adjourn.
Adjournment.
Second.
Moved and seconded, thank you very much. All those in favor? Councillor Braithwaite?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
Oh, all right, fine. In favor.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for yet another experiment and a few months of experiments. And I look forward to seeing you all, or as many of you as we can, in person again next week. Thank you so much.